Sail and welcome to Let's Talk with John and Regan. No Regan today, though. Today is Regan's birthday, and she's celebrating her birthday today. So I want to wish Regan a happy birthday, and I hope. Look, any of us who are having a birthday during this pandemic, and obviously many have already, and many will have. This actually marks a certain year in your life in a different way. So I'm hoping that Regan does enjoy herself, and I hope she can enjoy it with friends, socially distancing and being responsible. So but we wish her the best, and of course we wish her a happy birthday and every day. So we'll start there. Before I get into it, and I got a tough subject to talk about today, and I don't know, some people are gonna probably feel different ways about what I'm talking about today. But before I do that, let me remind people again, we are listener supported radio, and that means that we need you to support our radio station. And for me personally, I would love you to make donations to WBAI in the name of Let's Talk with John and Regan. And look, it's this the way stations raise money, and especially community radio, public radio. There's oftentimes premiums that are offered, and WBAI offers a lot of great premiums, but at the end of the day, it's the programs that are the premium. It's what we are doing here. It's what we're delivering in terms of content. And the only way that we can judge whether it's the content that you're interested in, rather than premiums, is for people to make sure that they do make a donation, make a pledge in the name of the show or shows that they listen to. Maybe even spread it around a little bit. I don't know, but we as producers, we're oftentimes evaluated on our fundraising, not solely, but somewhat. I mean, there's other metrics that they try to use, but it's really tough, and of course our station is struggling. We're trying a new format for fundraising, so we don't have the kinds of preemptions that we've had in the past. But what that requires is that you, the listener, understand that there's fewer preemptions, and understand that in the absence of those preemptions, with a full hour of asking for money, that we still need you to donate to the station. So I ask you to go to the pledge line. I ask you to go to 516-620-3602. Go to the website www.give2wbai.org, and look, show your support for the programs that you listen to. And look, I get it. If your idea is to send $50 to WBAI, and you happen to catch that there's a neat gift that you can get from another program, I get it. By all means, donate however you want to donate to the station. But it does help if for those of you who do just want to donate to for the content, that you express some level of support for the content you're listening to, not just for the products that may be offered up as thank yous. And otherwise it kind of changes what we're doing here. And I want to deliver content each week. That's what I want to do. I want to talk about something that perhaps you haven't heard before, or maybe you have heard, but you haven't heard somebody put it into words just quite the way that Regan and I do on a weekly basis. So again, I'm asking you to go to the pledge line, 516-620-3602. Go to the website, the web page, give2wbai.org. Become a buddy in the name of the station. Make a donation, a one-time donation. Donate when you can. Like I said, if you become a buddy, then you're signing up for a monthly donation. And whether it's $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever it is, it helps. It goes to our bottom line, and it helps us plan and to budget what we do as a radio station, especially in this tough time. We are undergoing all kinds of stress tests associated with trying to deliver programming. And I know that, look, in the era that we're in right now, with the political climate, with the the pandemic, with climate change, our station and the content that we're delivering, social justice issues, we are more important today than you probably go back to the 60s, where a station like WBAI has such a significant role in the public discourse. So again, Go to the pledge line, 516-620-3602. Go online. You can go to wbai.org and follow the prompts. But if you go to www.give2wbai.org, that is the specific fundraising page, and you'll see a variety of ways that you can donate. So I'm going to open up with that, and I'll probably come back to that at some point later in the program. But again, the program's the premium. What we're trying to do is deliver you content that you're not going to get anywhere else. Having said that, our sister station in Washington, WPFW, has picked up my Let's Talk Native programming, and they are running a Let's Talk Native show on Fridays at 2 p.m. So there you have it. Pacifica is doing something, or at least PFW and WBAI are doing something, where their commitment to a Native voice within the mixture of within the mix of content has continued to be a priority, one of the priorities here. But look, you got to tell them it's the right decision, and and this is where you vote with your dollars. Everybody's talking about voting. Well, this is where you vote with your dollars. So give. Unlike voting, you can give often. And you're not going to get in trouble. So dig deep and give often, as they say. All right. So what am I going to talk about today? Look, as we see so much of the social justice issues playing out, and we're seeing police chiefs and mayors, even police chiefs and mayors of color that are basically really, really under the gun for poor management and for the lack of any kind of reform. So what I want to talk about is this. You cannot just plug a person of color into a racist system and expect there to be substantive change. That's it. I mean, you just can't do it. So Barack Obama, first black president of the United States, not a lot of substantive change for black people. I mean, and look, I get it more, in more ways than most people can imagine, that he wasn't just a black person's president. In fact, we could argue that he was barely a black person's president because of there wasn't significant reform. There wasn't much that elevated the civil rights struggle or the struggle for equality. I mean, and if you look at how he handled issues like bombing people of color with drones in the Middle East, the level of deportations that took place, especially along the southern border. Not a whole lot of Canadians and not a whole lot of Europeans deported under the Obama administration. Just saying. The policies that Obama had as it related to Native people, lots of lip service. Look, millions of dollars, got spent by Native people going to Washington to have their presidential summit, which meant 15 minutes of photo ops. Not a lot of substance there either. So you can't just think that this guy got elected and we're going to see wholesale change. It doesn't happen. Why? Because the system's flawed. Same with the vice president. Look, I'm not gonna spend a whole show condemning Kamala Harris, but just because a person of color becomes a vice president isn't going to change things either. In fact, we can go right down the line. U.S. attorney generals. I mean, there's been a couple of them. There was Loretta Lynch. There was Eric Holder, Alberto Gonzalez. Not a whole lot of justice reform under these guys. And when you get to the state level, and this is kind of where I was going, and this is what kind of led me to this thing. For those who've been following what's happening in Rochester, New York, which is just down the street, just down the throughway from Seneca territory. Actually, it probably still is in Seneca territory. Yeah, Seneca Cayuga territory. That debacle is it is just there's no good in any of the people who should have taken charge of the situation. So you got the police chief and a whole bunch of the upper, brass of the Rochester Police Department that resigned, and the police chief's black. But the fact that there was a black police chief, and this happened, you see this playing out in city after city, it hasn't changed the systemic racism that exists within police, within policing, within the Justice Department, crime and punishment, none of that stuff. So when I say that we can't just plug a person of color into a racist system and expect, any substantive change, it's proven out. I mean, look, Letitia James, she didn't look. This stuff was supposed to have gone to her back in March when Prude was murdered by the Rochester police. In case I've got to reiterate. I mean, look, there are so many people of color, so many black men in particular, and black women that have been killed by police. If you can't even say, oh yeah, that murder that took place, because it's those murders that took place. So when Prude is murdered because his brother was concerned about his mental health and called the police to help him, and then ends up getting, murdered by the police, and it doesn't get investigated. There's no transparency with it anyway. And it's only because the video was released, probably through like a Freedom of Information Act kind of thing. It was finally released a couple of weeks ago. So what we're looking at now in September and in August is an event that took place in March. Yeah, sound familiar? Yeah, Breonna Taylor. Yeah, this is kind of that same thing that plays out. Ahmed. I mean, all these people who Arbery who get killed by police, and then you don't find out till later what the real circumstances is because nobody's saying anything, and there's nobody being arrested, there's nobody being suspended, there's no talk about what the investigation is. So when the video first came out, this thing has been referred to the state attorney general, Letitia James. Well, she didn't do anything. She hadn't done anything. She only announced a week after that she was investigating. So what the hell took place for months? So, and again, I'm not trying to blame black people in high places for the problem. I'm saying you can't put black people in high places and expect a racist system to change. They're being plugged into a system that has already been skewed, that's already been screwed, for centuries. So, and again, I'm not telling people of color don't go out and vote. I don't vote, but that's me. I'm not telling you don't vote for candidates that look like you and you hope will represent you. In fact, the more local those kinds of elections are, the more likely you're gonna see change. And if you don't believe me, think about this. Congressman. Well, let me back it up a little before we get to that. Governors. There's only been 2 governors in the history of the United States that were elected to be governors, black governors. Only 2. There were 2 others that became governors because they were the lieutenant governor in a corrupt situation. One of them was a Republican in Louisiana back decades and decades ago. And the other one was David Patterson when Eliot Spitzer got busted for soliciting prostitution and had to resign in disgrace. He became the first black governor of the state of New York. Not a good governor for people of color. And look, that's what Democrats want to claim, is that they represent social justice and they represent equality. Not so much. And so the only 2 that have been elected was Douglas Wilder and Deval Patrick. And again, no real substantive change for policies to address racism in those 2 states. You can't just plug somebody into those systems and expect change. Look at Congress, and the reason there's only 2 that were ever elected is because white people still are the major contributors to the electorate. I think I say it all the time. People have to be reminded. Black people only represent 13% of the U.S. population. 13%, and that's the largest of a distinct racial designation. I mean, we can get into Hispanic, but that gets or Latino or Latinx or indigenous with colonized by Spain or whatever you want to call it. That is a decent population, but that could be white, it could be black, it could be brown. I mean, it could be indigenous. I mean, there's there's a difference between ethnicity and racism, or race, I should say, and so that might be a larger population, but it's a mixed race population. If you're gonna buy into the whole racial designation thing, Native people, yeah, we represent less than 1% of the U.S. population. We're not a priority. We're not a voting bloc. We aren't a significant constituency. None of that stuff. So, but by all means, and I know there's a lot of hype because people assume that people of color are going to be predominantly Democrats. Not even sure if that's true because religion plays a big part of it, and many brown people are devoted, Christians, and many black people are, and so these are assumptions that are made, and there's a lot of pandering. I talked about on the last show how much pandering there is to, to black voters and Hispanic voters and that kind of stuff, and a lot of the fluff that's thrown out there. But at the end of the day, you might be able to elect a congressman that might view things a little bit your way. And here I'm talking about, black candidates, because you may have a predominantly, black population within these gerrymandered congressional districts. The likelihood of electing a person of color to the Senate, now you're talking about a statewide election, and, you don't have the benefit of having, people who are more closely connected to those candidates. It happens. It's happened. Usually somebody has to become a congressman and have some level of success or credibility in the House before they can, feel like they can launch a bid for the Senate. But the problem is the systems. So the systems that exist for policing are problematic. The justice system is racist. So putting in a black judge who's bound by everything from sentencing guidelines to case law that is always going to forgive a police officer for wrongly killing somebody because they thought they were a threat. None of that stuff changes. And look, you can throw black people on the Supreme Court, and you can throw brown people on the Supreme Court. It still doesn't change the system. This is all based on case law, and the case law has hundreds of years of racist rulings. Yeah, and to overturn those rulings is a huge obstacle. I mean, and it doesn't happen often. In order to overturn, unless you can find really blatant language in the ruling, but see, you don't need to have blatant language in these rulings, to note the effects that it has, the disproportionate effects that many of these laws and much of this case law has, how it's affected people. So look, I'm bringing this up because we are going to see. Look, Buffalo's got a black mayor. Buffalo's a pretty racist town, folks. And so how does a black guy get elected as the mayor of Buffalo? Well, yeah, there's a decent black population to vote for him, but he also very much accommodates the system, and the system being predominantly white. Look, we see this at every level. At the corporate level, management. Look, if you have a whole corporation that is built on white privilege, if you put a black person as the manager of that system, hey, this goes for radio stations too, folks. Just saying, you can't change the dynamic. You can't change the fact that this has been a pattern that has existed for decades, and people can be well-intended. I think there are many people of color who run for office think that they're going to affect change, and then they find themselves constrained by the systems. I also think that there are people of color who are just trying to succeed at white man's game, and they're not really that interested in changing. And I'm not just picking on people of color who happen to be Republicans. Democrats are the same way. I mean, look, I've got to bring it up all the time to show or demonstrate, I should say, when somebody who you think is on the left is really adopting very, very right-wing ideology. And although Ruth Bader Ginsburg isn't a person of color, she certainly comes from a population that should know oppression, and Yet she cited the doctrine of Christian discovery. Jewish woman on the Supreme Court, liberal darling, cites the doctrine of Christian discovery as her out. Footnote number one is her out not even to really hear, but not to rule for the Oneidas in their land reclamation, land that they're buying and taking back into an area that that same Supreme, or not a Supreme Court has ruled that the Oneidas have a right to sue for title of that land because of fraud, because of deception, because of all this stuff. And yet she says, nah, you can't do that. Once white people came, once the Christian nations of Europe came to the United States, land title became vested in the sovereign. They were the sovereign, not native people. I mean, that's basically what she cited. I mean, so you hear these kinds of things that are said, and when they come from the people who are supposed to be these bastions of progressiveness, not so much. So, look, the Rochester thing is really ugly, and it's gotten ugly. I'm like, man, there's people who are getting brutalized in some of those protests that are happening out there. I just saw a picture of somebody who got their face all busted up got hit in the face with a tear gas canister or a smoke canister or something. And of course they're shooting, not just pepper spray, but these pepper bullets or pods. They're like paintballs, but they have, like this pepper spray stuff inside of it. And those things are brutal. I mean, look, if anybody's ever done paintball, as a sport or as a competition or whatever, you have to wear headgear because that stuff is really, really dangerous. And these freaking cops are shooting people in the face with these things. I mean, it's really clear in the directions, and I've seen things from like both concussion grenades as well as these rubber bullets, they call them, or beanbag bullets. It couldn't be more clear that the directions from the manufacturer say you're not supposed to shoot people in the face. And you're not supposed to shoot people at close range, but it doesn't stop them. And in fact, their training with a gun is to you don't shoot somebody with a gun unless you plan to kill them. It is a lethal. It is a weapon used to kill people. No police officer is ever trained to shoot them in the leg so we can save them. No, that's not what they're trained to do. I mean, they have weapons that are supposed to be less than lethal or non-lethal. I mean, nobody's going to shoot somebody in the face with a taser because it's a smaller target and they want to hit the body. But I'll tell you, these concussion grenades, these pepper bullets or pods that they're shooting, these bean bags, these rubber bullets, all of this stuff. Look, pepper spray, they say, the whole idea of pepper spray is you spray them in the face. But that's not the same thing that you're supposed to do with these again, these paintball pods with pepper, with this agent in it. That's supposed to hit somebody and then disperse and then get in their face. You don't shoot them in the face with it, but that's not what the cops are doing. And that's not what they're doing in Rochester. And so Rochester's turned into, one of the headlines. Buffalo had their days of fame when they knocked that poor 70-year-old man down and cracked his head so hard on the concrete that blood immediately poured out of his ear. And now it's Rochester. So, and by the way, Democratic governor, Democratic mayors, I think in both Rochester and Buffalo. Buffalo's got a black mayor. And Rochester used to have a black police chief, not anymore because he resigned. And it's like they take it personal. Can you imagine the gall of somebody calling me out on my job because, because they want me to be transparent. And you see, he was just following the rules, and not the law, but the rules that systemic racism has put in place. So now I bring all of this stuff up, and I don't mean to pick on black people in office. Trust me, in the second half of the show, I'm going to talk about Native people in some of these same positions. But look, 8 years of a black president didn't amount to substantive change for black people or people of color in general. It, by many accounts, got worse. Now look, did he do some things for the economy and all that stuff that people want to rave about Barack Obama over? Sure. But did he appear to be a decent husband, especially compared to what's in there now? Yes. And a decent father? Yes. And I don't condemn him for any of that stuff. But to think that you're going to vote for somebody just because of the color of their skin, or by placing somebody in a position of authority, and that the color of their skin is going to affect change. I'm not saying that people of color don't enter these jobs with good intentions. I think they do. Some are just trying to advance themselves individually, and they aren't as committed to their people, and you can see that in their personal lives, right? You can see how they live. But others, I think, do have good intentions. But the system is, if we don't change the system, and I mean a wholesale change. Yeah, I know. Biden's backing away from his conversation about police reform. He did an overture about, slavery, the African slave trade and the chattel slavery of the United States being America's original sin. I got issues with that. Talked about it before. Not going to go through it again. But yeah, it makes those kind of overtures, but that doesn't lead to anything necessarily that changes the system. I mean, there is denial all the way to, not just to this president, but other presidents. There is denial associated with with systemic racism. I mean, it is clearly a problem. It is clearly a big problem. But I'm gonna look. Native people have entered the fray too, and I'm going to talk about some of the Native congressmen. I know there's some of them that have made the news in the last couple of years. Deborah Haaland, Sharice David, but there's other Native people who have run for these non-Native offices, and I'm going to talk about some of that record. So we're going to do that. Hey, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we're gonna take a break, and then we'll come back, and I'm gonna take this next step to say this is the problem with the not having or not really getting any substantive change when people of color get elected into the offices. All right, this is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk.
All right, this is WBAI New York 99.5 FM and WBAI.org online. John Kane, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Did I drop off for a little bit?
Hey. A little bit.
All right. Well,
a little bit. I mean, you was coming. You see, you was going so deep into your thought process there. I know that when you was on it, and then the internet gods just like say, "Yeah, we're just gonna put a plank on this guy," and while you're still going on. And it was quite unfortunate because you were in the middle of talking about the mayor of Buffalo and what the situation was in Buffalo, which is still
in Rochester. Rochester is where
it's
really hitting
as well. Well, yeah. I know you was making a point about Rochester, but you was getting into your point about Buffalo and how racist that city is, and just how further making your point about that putting black and brown people in a place that is systemically racist doesn't necessarily mean change at all. So, John, I'm just going to let you continue on.
Let me go from there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's really my point. I mean, I think people can get excited about a black president, or on the rare occasion that a black governor is elected, or somehow slides into office like David Patterson did, or when they see a black attorney general, U.S. attorney general, like I said, Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder, Alberto Gonzalez, who was U.S. attorney general. I mean, it just doesn't necessarily equate to the change that people think it's going to. And so even when you get perhaps a series of appointments, so you get a black president and you get a black U.S. attorney, or maybe you get a couple of black judges, the system still hasn't been changed. And you can hear it in politicians. You can hear it. Look, even when you listen to some of these politicians who were activists in their younger days, and how tempered they became And look, I understand there's going to be a certain amount of that, but how tempered they become when they become senators or congressmen or whatever. I mean, you see it all the time. Look, they're educated in that system. They've learned how to individually navigate through the systems of racism and advance themselves in that system. But it's no none of these guys have a track record of making change every step along the way. If they, and they couldn't. I mean, they couldn't. They would have been stifled, coming right out of the gate. That's just the way the system works. So, and so that leads me back because look, as a Native person, we are inundated, even though our population is small. We're not like I said, we're not a voting bloc. We get inundated with this. Oh, you've got to, you've got to be counted in the census, and you got to, you got to get out and vote, and and then we have a tendency to get enamored by Native people reaching these positions of authority or power or influence anyway. I've got to remind people that Barack Obama appointed Diane Humatiwa as a federal judge in Arizona. But that recommendation didn't come from Democrats. That recommendation came from the Republican senators in Arizona. And the first time Diane Humatiwa had to rule in a case involving Native land rights, she ruled against Native people. I'm just saying, it's not like she used some of her own background and had a stronger sense for what land rights should be. No, she just, for her, it ends up being a matter of, whether somebody has the legal right to run a highway through Native territory or not, and dismiss, whatever Native claim there may be to oppose it. So that's what she did. And of course, when Scalia dies, I heard Native people say, "Oh, let's nominate Diane Humatiwa to the Supreme Court." Just be careful what you wish for, because if you look at historically, there have been Native people in very high positions in the U.S. government, and the vice president. I mentioned it here before. I know most people still aren't familiar with it, but Charles Curtis, who was Kaw, Osage, and Potawatomi, he was a congressman in Kansas. He made the leap to become a U.S. senator in Kansas, and then was the vice president under Herbert Hoover. I mean, that's heartbeat away from the presidency. And you know what? He wasn't good for Native people as a congressman. He wasn't good for Native people as a senator, and he wasn't good for Native people as a vice president. And look, and I guess we shouldn't expect. Look, if you're black, you shouldn't expect a black, politician to forget what got him voted in, which is white people. Again, black people, you're only 13% of the U.S. population. You didn't get these guys voted in or put into these positions like U.S. Attorney General or or president or vice president without a whole lot of white people, that overwhelmingly outnumbered you. So I mean, maybe we're stupid for expecting that a person who looks like us, who gets into an office, is going to somehow change things substantively. It doesn't happen because the system is geared that way, and that's so yeah. When we look at Native people, most Native people who have had success in the non-Native elections were Republicans. The Until Deborah Allen and Sharice David got elected, the only two congressmen were Republicans out of Oklahoma, Tom Cole and Mark Wayne Mullen. Devoted Trump followers, very, very right wing, and not necessarily people who are looking out for the best interests of Native people. And they'll get put on they'll even get put on a couple of committees that is supposed to, well, we're Native, so we should be on this committee. And you know what that means? That means they get paid a little bit more for being on these committees and subcommittees. It doesn't mean that they're representing any substantial diversity in these things. It's right and left. That's the way these things break down. And I'm not going to, necessarily condemn Deborah Allen or Sharice David, but look, I'm sorry, let me get her name, Davids, but they got voted in by white people. Native people did not get Sharice Davids and Deborah Allen elected. It was, there may have been, some other people of color that contributed, but predominantly, if you look at those voting districts, it's predominantly white people. So, who are they? Who are they accountable to? I mean, who is their constituency? I mean, Deborah Haaland isn't understanding what Native people in Haudenosaunee territory are up against. I mean, she might cite something because it plays well on the news. And I've heard very little out of Sharice David, and maybe she's doing some very fine work as a congressperson, but I don't expect any substantial change. Let me again. Ben Campbell. Ben Campbell was the last, and that was 15 years ago, that there was a Native a person in the U.S. Senate who was Native, and you know what? Ben Campbell ran as a Democrat, then switched parties, and then got reelected and continued to get it reelected as a Republican. Yeah, Republican. That's just kind of the way it goes. Again, Charles Curtis. Look, when I tell people there was a Native vice president and they're surprised, what does that tell you? Of course you're surprised. Why would you know that it was? Because there was nothing significant about him being the vice president of the United States. People knew who Hoover was, but and I get it. You look through history. Not everybody can name the vice presidents that sat under every one of these presidents, but you would think the only Native person to ever rise to that level might have been noteworthy. It wasn't, and it never will be. Look, you're not going to see substantive change because you have a black U.S. attorney or a black state attorney general. You're not going to see, the path is already well established for them to follow, and to get major change in the House or the Senate. Yeah, I mean, you're going to see a few more people of color in the House, but you're not going to see major changes. So this gets down to what, again, I'm missing Regan on this conversation. We talk about how important local activity is, not just voting for local politicians. But I'll concede to that. And look, if you live in New York City, you should understand that who your city officials are. And it's not enough to just vote for somebody. You still got to hold them accountable. One of the things that I say even about, even the national election stuff, the senators and these congressmen, they get elected and then spend the bulk of their term trying to ensure that they'll get reelected. And look, the president, same thing. The first term of a U.S. president is really geared towards not trying to screw up what they hope to be their second term. Some people fail miserably at that. The current one, I'm hoping, but the system, it doesn't change. It stays the same. It doesn't matter who sits in those positions. So we've got to do stuff more at the local level. And I say this, as a Native person, when people are saying, well, we're not happy with quote unquote tribal government. Well, then do what they're not doing. Make them irrelevant. And you can make government irrelevant at every level if you take more responsibility away from them and take it on you as you the people. I mean, people want to talk about we the people. We the people means nothing. Let me reiterate something I said a couple of shows ago. Even if 60% of the U.S. electorate or the American population thinks Donald Trump is a moron, and I think many people who support him think he's a moron, but even if 60% are embarrassed by him and think he's a moron, over half the Senate, half of the U.S. Senate supports Donald Trump. Almost half the House. Most of the majority of U.S. governors in the United States. He has the majority of the Supreme Court. He boasts about how many judges he had, that he's nominated, record-breaking levels. I don't even know if that's true. I can't believe half of what he says. But all these appointments into these positions, the fact that every police union in the United States has gone out, has endorsed Donald Trump. It doesn't matter what the population thinks. He got elected. He lost the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. So, look, that's the system, and the system is geared towards. Actually, it's actually skewed to benefit the right, and this idea of conservatism. They talk about how strict reading of the U.S. Constitution. Yeah, like hell. I mean, like hell. And you know what? That document wasn't that great anyway. It's loaded with racism. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. It is all geared towards white male dominance. And yeah, they amended it a few times, but those amendments don't carry. I mean, ending slavery didn't end racism. And in fact, racism and the tipping point for social unrest based on racism issues is probably at the highest level that it's ever been. This many years after the abolition of slavery. Yeah. So how'd that work out? So, look, I'm not condemning a person of color for getting into those positions. What I'm telling everybody else, don't think that person is going to have the leeway to affect changes. And don't get too excited about it. And the thing is, don't assume because a person of color is in those positions that they're going to do the right thing. That's why you got to stay on them, and you got to stay on them hard. So, look, there wasn't nearly enough criticism from from black voices on Barack Obama. I mean, he got elected twice, and there wasn't nearly enough criticism. Why? Because everybody was so defensive because the right was criticizing him so much. So everybody feels like, well, we got to defend him. Well, what about policy? And it's the same thing. Look, everybody's going to say, well, Biden and Harris, they got to get elected. Otherwise, it's Trump and Pence. It doesn't mean you can't criticize them. In fact, they should be being held now to what their position is going to be. And if they don't fulfill that, if they shift, and you've already seen it through the course of this campaign already, you heard talk about reform, about police reform, and about systemic racism within the system. Now, as soon as the right starts saying, oh, yeah, Biden wants to abolish the police, all of a sudden, he's got to back away from his comments. This is how wishy-washy these guys are. Why? Because getting elected is the priority. Policy isn't. You only do policy that's going to win political favor, not really affect substantive change. This is the problem. This is the problem. So, I mean, it's when I look at the violence that has happened and look, Trump is all about saying, oh, look, it's all Democratic states and cities with Democratic mayors. Yeah, it is, and it's not because it's the systems that have been placed that aren't necessarily, the Democrats can't claim ownership to the whole system. They just don't represent any substantive change. So, I mean, look, urban populations are oftentimes more lean towards the Democrats. Rural populations lean to the right. So when you can say, well, the problem with cities is that they're run by Democrats. No, that's not necessarily true. I mean, they aren't fixed being run by Democrats. So I really wanted to take some time and talk about our expectations. And not just how to manage our expectations when somebody, whether it's a native person who makes it into Congress or into some position of power, or whether it's a black person who makes it into some position of power, the highest positions of power in the United States. I'm not saying we should drop our expectations and just let them slide, but I think we have to manage our expectations because the only way you're going to get any kind of substantive change out of these people is to ride them hard. And again, Deborah Hallen, she doesn't represent where I live. She doesn't. I mean, and yeah, she's native, and Sharice Davids, they're native, but and Cole and Mullen, They don't give a rat's ass about Haudenosaunee or any native peoples who are facing some of the adversity that we're facing. Those of us who, fighting pipelines. And you know what? I know they will address things like missing and murdered Indigenous women, but will they change anything? No, because it gets into this thing. Well, we are pro-police. I mean, we are ex-military. We have all of this, and it doesn't, and they're all like that. Deborah Hallen, she's a military brat. So you can't tell me that she's some some flaming liberal. She's not. So again, I know people get excited about it. Look, I got a lot of people. I got into a lot of heated discussions with people that I was too condemning of the Native women who made it into Congress. I'm not condemning them, but they don't represent me, and the likelihood of them. I mean, nobody in Congress. Congress doesn't represent me, so I'm not just blaming these women. I mean, that's not my system, and we don't do enough. We don't do enough in the run-up, regardless of election, in the run-up to election, after election, pre-election, post-election. We don't do enough to hold people accountable. And that's why we end up giving a pass. And we're so afraid that we're going to sound like we're criticizing and maybe dashing somebody's hopes of getting elected. Look, Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. She still didn't get elected. And it wasn't, people want to say, well, it's because, all the Bernie bros stayed home. No, it's because she wouldn't open herself up to to adopting policies that the left could really embrace. And she screwed up her campaign. She didn't concentrate enough on swing states. She thought she had it in the bag. It doesn't matter if you're running against a moron. There's a moron running, maybe two, running this time. It doesn't matter. You can't assume. I mean, we talk about this all the time on the programs. Is like, how is it that people can't see what's wrong with Trump's positions or what's wrong with Biden's position? And it's not just the idea of voting for the lesser of two evils. It's like getting to a place where there's never going to be somebody, so you settle. And by settling, you are still empowering people that don't share your worldview. I mean, if Joe Biden gets elected, he's going to be on top of the world. Look, the damn man has run for president how many freaking times? So he doesn't care if he gets elected because people didn't like Donald Trump. His ego is going to well. It's going to swell up, and he's going to say, yeah, I'm the man now. Now I can do the things that I couldn't do when I was a senator. And I'm concerned because the things that he did do when he was a senator weren't that great. So that's where we're at. I mean, that's where we're at with this conversation. So I wanted to spend some time, and I do miss Regan. Would have been great to have this conversation with. So maybe we'll revisit this at some point. And I don't begrudge her. It's her birthday. Happy birthday, Regan. But this would have been a great conversation. And look, we're getting to a place where perhaps we can get back to doing some phone calls, and I can start hearing from some of you folks. And look, I'm prepared to take the beating if you don't agree with some of the stuff that I say, or you want to add to it, or change the conversation. We'll do that. But again, I one of the things I got to do as we close here is I got to remind people we are listener-supported radio. We need your support. Look, if I said something that got you hot today, if you didn't agree with something I said, that's all the more reason to have the conversation. Not necessarily with me. In your community, say, look, I heard this guy on Wbai, and he made some points, but we better do something about this. Or I didn't agree with him at all. So I'm asking you to go to the pledge line. I'm asking you to go to 516-620-3602. That's 516-620-3602. Look, we're under some pressure here. We need your support. We desperately need your support. And this COVID-19 thing has impacted. Look, we're always under the gun because we are solely listener sponsored radio. But with everybody being hurt by COVID-19, it's made it that much more difficult. And and as a native voice in New York City, look, I know there's law firms, I know there's investment firms that are managing native money, that are managing native legal issues. Some of you guys are still pulling in your 6, 7 income figure incomes. Make a donation. Look, you're not going to ruin yourself, by throwing $1,000 at WBAI, and do it in the name of Let's Talk Native. Let's Talk with John Kane and Regan, the Loggins. I mean, make the effort. And look, if it's $5 a month that you can do, then do $5 a month. But I'm asking you to go to the pledge line 516-620-3602. I'm asking you to go to the website www.give2, that's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org, and make a contribution. Become a buddy. Become a buddy in the name of Let's Talk. Make a donation, a one-time donation. Make a donation this month and next month if you can, or the month after that if you can, or the week after that if you can. Do what you can when you can. And like I said, unlike Trump telling you to vote often, I'm telling you to donate often. You're not going to get in any trouble here. You can make a donation of any size, and you can do it as frequently as your pocketbook allows you to. But I ask you to do that. I'm asking you to support WBAI and support Let's Talk with John and Regan by making a donation in the name of the show. Do it on the pledge line, 516-620-3602, or do it on the website, give2wbai.org. I want to thank you guys for listening. This is a subject that some of these things need to be said. So we'll catch you next week. Well, I'll take it back. We're off next week. One more reason to make a donation this week. We'll be off next week, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk. Yahweh.